I don't get it, to be honest with you.
That really doesn't surprise any of us, David.
Seriously, if I didn't have ambition, nothing would get done.
Is that supposed to be a comment about us?
I have a napkin, please.
You know what I mean. Like we're supposed to sit around and wait for things to happen to us magically.
There's nothing wrong with a little magic in life.
I can't trust magic. What I can trust is my own will to get things done. That's my main problem with what Dr. Dyer's saying.
Okay, he's right there. You want to keep it down?
He didn't hear me.
Dr. Dyer, you want to come
hi.
join us?
Sure, I'd love to. How you guys doing?
Great.
Good.
This chicken's great.
Good.
So, Dr. Dyer,
Yes.
we were all just discussing your
Right.
first interview and all those things you said. And basically, David thinks that it's all BS.
What? David? Yes, really?
I don't think all of it is. I mean, I'm entitled to my own opinion, right?
Absolutely. You are entitled to your opinion, and I respect it. And you know, David, you don't have to get this all at once. You know, just get a little bit at a time. That's all it takes. You know, you just start practicing it. Eventually, it becomes a way of life, and you start living from a different perspective.
I'm not really a spiritual person. I'm too busy.
Yeah, spirituality is kind of like a luxury.
That is true. I find it hard to find time to meditate.
Let me ask you this. Do you think that you're an inspired person? Do you live an inspired life? Do you feel inspired?
I have no idea.
Really? Well, let's take an example. Let's supposing I had an apple pie that we had just made. And out of this apple pie, we take one slice. We take the rest of the pie, put it over here, and I take this slice and I give it to someone. Let's say I gave it to you, Ron, and I say, Ron, what is this?
What's an apple pie?
How do you know that? How do you know it's an apple pie?
Because it came from an apple pie.
So, well, you laugh, but I mean, the truth is that's a very profound statement that you just made, that everything in the universe must be like what it came from. You take an acorn and you'll never get a rose bush out of it. You look at yourself and you ask yourself the question, where did I come from? Who am I and what am I like? You know, instead of making our choices out of the place that we really are, our authentic self, we're making them out of the ego. And every time we make choices out of the ego, all kinds of things begin to happen to us that take us away from finding meaning in our lives.
How do you know if you're making a choice from your higher self?
You gauge everything on the basis of how you feel. Are you stressed out? Are you anxious? Are you fearful? Are you angry? Do you feel good about yourself? Do you feel like you're on purpose? Do you feel like your life has any meaning? When you're operating out of the only part of yourself that is authentic, bliss is your response.
But what about the upside of ambition? I mean, I'm a filmmaker, and if I didn't, doesn't ego serve me? I mean, if I was going with the flow, I'd never get a movie made.
That's a conclusion that you come to because you think out of the ego. You know, the fact is that you might even be able to make much greater films if you came out of a higher place. Imagine yourself as being able to live and work and do everything that you do from this place that, well, it's called Dharma.
What's Dharma?
Dharma is a spiritual principle that implies there is a purpose to our lives. Like an otter has a dharma, a bird has a dharma. Everything has a purpose. And when you find yourself living from that purpose, you have found your dharma. Your dharma is something that you will be living by. And rather than constantly using the ego, you will begin to say, this is what I'm here for. It's like, I call it a calling. It's like an inner calling.
How do you know what your dharma is? Like, what if you can't even find your dharma?
Yeah, I can't even find a date, let alone my dharma.
Well, your dharma isn't anything you're ever going to find. Your dharma is something that you're always connected to. It is your divine purpose. It is something that you are aligned with throughout your entire life. The ego has kept us away from it.
Excuse me, I have to take this. This is what I'm talking about.
I'm sorry to interrupt. How does this help me find a date exactly?
You don't need to find a date. If you live what I'm talking about, you'll understand that everything will be perfect and everyone that comes into your life will come in on time perfectly. You're a divine creation of God. You're a spiritual being. You don't need anyone else to confirm that.
I love that.
It's true. Dr. Dyer said it was.
It is true.
You know, I don't want you to think that I don't appreciate what you're saying. I do. Not that you would necessarily be concerned with what I'm saying, because that's the ego telling you what to think, right?
So you were listening.
Yeah, I'm listening. I just think it's good to have a plan.
Well, what's your plan?
To be a successful filmmaker, to make a name for myself, to make money, to have a good relationship.
So you're talking here about prosperity, you're talking about abundance, you're talking about happiness. I haven't any problem with that. I've been attracting abundance and prosperity into my life forever. I think it's actually quite easy to do. I really believe in that.
For you.
Well, you know, the problem what you're talking about here is the ego. The ego and your attachments. You know, you become attached to you know, how much money you're making and how well your film is doing, and is everything working the way I've been told that it should work. When you become attached to things and they go away, you then lose who you are.
But it feels so much like survival.
We're not talking about survival here. We're talking about a shift away from the morning of your life and having to do everything for external reasons and moving into a higher place in your life.
Why don't we start with that tomorrow? How to make this shift.
It's a good idea. You know, I tell my audiences all the time that if this is something new to you and you've never heard it before, there's a shift probably heading your way as well. You know?
That's all I need.
It could happen. When great thinkers talk about union with God, there's this theme that comes through. It's about being in silence. When everyone else is asleep and there are no distractions, when you feel yourself alone with Source. This is the time when you are closest to Source. Being alone with Source is not just about feeling good, it's about a new awareness of my own divinity and what it's capable of achieving. It's all about returning back to the place that you came from. T.S. Eliot has a great quote, "We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time."
Rolling. Okay, we'll start with the transition from ambition to meaning.
Great, it's a good idea. I can give you an example from my own life. It might be helpful. When I first started writing, I was very blessed to be considered, quote, successful. My motivation very often became how much money was I going to make on this book? What was my next contract going to look like? How many weeks did it appear on the New York Times bestseller list? What position was it? Did you get on the Tonight Show? Did you get on the Donahue Show?
Hold on, I'm confused.
Yeah?
Yeah, if you were a success, who cares what was motivating you?
Well, I guess you begin to change your definition of what it is that constitutes success. I mean, success can be identified in those terms, and there are other ways to look at it as well.
But there's people listening to you. I mean, where would you be if you didn't initiate it? I mean, it got you started, right?
I'm sorry to interrupt. Are we switching to a Q&A format?
I'm just curious. Sorry.
No, that's okay. It's a very normal question. It's a very common concern that people have. For myself, we talked about my writing, David, and yes, by all means, it was successful, but there was a part of me, inside of me, that said, there's something more for me. I was writing books about psychology, your erroneous zones, pulling your own strings, the sky's the limit. All of them were doing well. All of them were bestsellers. It was all, but inside of me, I was shifting. There was a calling to something else, and I could see the shift taking place in my life. And the shift was, it was more in the direction of spirituality. It was more in the direction of higher consciousness. I began to become excited and thrilled by reading people like Krishnamurti, by reading people like Muktananda. And I remember going to my agent and I said, I want to write a book about how to take some of these great spiritual ideas. He said, no. You're going to write a book about sex. He said, this is going to sell. This is like Dr. Ruth has got one, but you're way better than Dr. Ruth, you know, and he's going on and on. And he said, and then I've got a second book for you, and we're going to do a 2-book deal, and you're going to write a book about how to make money. You know, Wayne Dyer's approach to making money. And I'd say, Artie, I said, I can't do that. I said, I have to write about it. He said, no, nobody's going to buy this stuff. He said, that's the airy-fairy stuff. That's out there. That's all that new agey stuff. He said, you don't want to. I said, but I have to write that. That's what I'm living. That's what I'm feeling. It's so exciting. And I remember submitting the proposal to him, and he said, all right, I'll send it in. And they reluctantly, they didn't give me much of an advance at all because they didn't even believe in it. But off I went. There was a strong inner kind of feeling that I had something greater to give. I had something that I had to do that was beyond just going through the motions, just doing what I had already mastered, what I knew how to do. I remember when I made the shift, even though there was a little bit of fear, I remember feeling probably the freest that I'd felt ever in my life. I wasn't motivated by whether people are going to buy it, how much money I'm going to make, whether people are going to put me on a bestseller list. Those became external kind of factors. Those became things that started to chase me rather than me chasing it. Basically, I think, David, what I'm trying to say to you is that you get to a place in your life where you start to be guided by something that's larger than yourself. Just stay aligned with what you're here for and stay in harmony with Spirit, with God, with Source. Stay there. And as you stay there, the meaning phase of your life begins to take over. And once you cross over into the afternoon of your life, it's impossible to go back.
Wait.
David, why don't we take it from where Wayne was talking about the shift? We can just continue from there.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, this shift, this movement from ambition to meaning, from the morning to the afternoon of your life, generally it's preceded by what we call a quantum moment. Sounds strange, perhaps, to use a term like that, but quantum moment really refers to the characteristics of what it is like when you have what Maslow called a peak experience. The first of these qualities, there's four of them. The first of them is that it's very vivid. The second quality or characteristic of these quantum moments is that it's a surprise. And the third characteristic of these quantum moments is that they are benevolent. They always feel good. The fourth and final quality is that it's enduring. That is, it isn't just something that comes and then goes and it's out the window. It lasts with you forever. For example, I left drinking behind in my life 21 years ago. And I couldn't even imagine that I could have given it up because I'd always had 2 or 3 beers every single day for the previous 10, 15, 20 years. I couldn't even remember a day when I hadn't. And I knew that I had to make that change. And it was 4:05 a.m. in the morning. I could remember the clock when it turned. I woke up and there was like a breeze in the room, something that I've never experienced before. The smell of roses. This was 21 years ago now. I can tell you what was hanging on the closet, the hook that I had there. On the mirror there, I had a cartoon that I had there. I can still see that thing exactly as if it happened this morning. The vividness of this is something that I've never, ever been able to forget. I can remember how surprised I was at what was happening at that time. It was almost as if some kind of force had taken over, and I was just amazed by it.
So if you're lucky this happens to you?
David, it has nothing to do with luck. It's like when the moment is right, when you are in a different state, in a different place in your life, exactly what is supposed to happen will happen for you. The low points in your own life, these times when you think that nothing could go any worse, oftentimes are the things that we need to propel ourselves to a higher place. Let me give you an example. The night before that moment that I just described to you, I had taken my entire family, 5 children, and my wife, and we had all gone to this restaurant. And like I always did, every single time I went to a restaurant, I ordered not just 1 beer, but 2. And that was so that in case the waiter wasn't there when I wanted my second one, I would be able to have it. And the waiter said to me, "Oh, excuse me, sir." He said, "I'm sorry, but I can't serve you alcohol." And I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, last night one of our waiters served someone who was underage, and we had our license suspended." I said, "Come on, we're getting out of here." And I made each one of my children get up, get back into the car, strapped into their car seats and so on. My wife, who, God knows, had so much to do, and it was such a hardship for her. But it didn't seem to matter to me at that time because I wanted to have my beers, and I was making myself more important than everyone else. And we drove off and went to another restaurant. And I can remember thinking that night as I went to sleep how ashamed I was. My wife tried to talk to me a little bit about it, but I would have none of it. I was right, and that's just what the ego always makes you. It makes you right. And that night, That experience that I had at 4:05 a.m. the next day, not only did it get me off of alcohol, it probably saved my life. It transformed my life in so many different ways. And it was all because I was open to it. You don't believe that?
Sounds like more sitting around until some sort of epiphany comes to you.
It's not about waiting around. You know, in the Tao, one of the great lessons that I learned is that it teaches us how to be soft, how to be flexible, how to not be always in control. One of the great teachings of the Tao says that let yourself be lived by it.
But you didn't do anything.
That's the whole point. That's the place you want to get to, where you just allow. In the recovery movement, it's called letting go and letting God. Allowing this source that is always flowing through each and every one of us to do and perform its magic. And that magic will always work in our best interest if we just surrender to it. If you could just stop interfering in your own life and just let yourself be done. If you can get to that place, nothing will be left undone. Everything that you need will be there for you. It's mysterious for most of us because we believe that we're the ones who have to do everything. Isn't it interesting that you had everything you needed in the first 9 months? Why isn't that true for the next 90 years? Because we interfere. When I was 19 years old, I was in the United States Navy and as an enlisted man. And I was given my assignment to join the aircraft carrier, the USS Ranger. And it was on deployment in Yokosuka, Japan. So I boarded a refrigerator ship, the USS Vega, in Alameda, California. And just as I was getting on that ship to take my 29-day voyage across the Pacific Ocean, my Uncle Bill Volek, who was a school teacher in Hayward, California, handed me a copy of a book. And the book was a collection of short stories written by Leo Tolstoy. He wrote not just great novels and great stories, but great spiritual literature as well. He was considered to be the soul of Russia. And the first story in this collection was called The Death of Ivan Ilyich. Now, Ivan Ilyich was a judge who lived in Moscow. One of the more important features of this story is his relationship to his wife, who he basically hated because he despised his work. And he felt that she had pressured him and pushed him into doing this, that it was a prestigious thing to do. And he was filled with internal rage and anger at what he had done. The title of the story kind of gives it away, The Death of Ivan Ilyich. You know he's going to die. Now, Ivan Ilyich was lying on his deathbed, and his wife is holding his hand, this woman that basically he despised for all of his life. And he looks up into her eyes, and his last words are, "What if my whole life has been wrong?" And he died. I was very shaken and very moved by that. And I took out a pad of paper, and I wrote a note to myself. And I said, "Dear Wayne, don't die with your music still in you." And I've lived that for my entire life. When you die, you will return to that source, and you will be in that space of love. But the Tao says that you don't have to die to get there. You can die to the ego and live from that space of perfect love while you're here. That vivid, surprising, benevolent, enduring quality that defines the quantum moment that leads us into the shift is really an indication that you're returning back to the source. You're beginning to live from the Tao. It's reconnecting with the field of intention. In Greek, the word enthusiasm breaks down to entheos-iasm, which means the God within. When you have passion, when you have enthusiasm for something inside of you, that's really God speaking to you and saying to you, don't get to the end of your life and have to be able to say what Ivan Ilyich said, "What if my whole life has been wrong?" I can't think of a greater tragedy than that.